Hello and welcome to another Register Kettle, your chance to hear about the news from the people that actually write it. Now, it's been a busy week on the China front and Middle Kingdom kerfuffles are still going on. We started off with President Joe Biden signing off on a huge range of tariffs against Chinese products, including processors, solar panels and electric vehicles. We've got serious security warnings, not that those aren't unusual, and various other shenanigans going on our probably you'd say certainly the world's second superpower, maybe the first. As Henry Luce put it, the era of the American century may be ending. So, anyway, now, the week started off with a really interesting one, Brandon. A Chinese bit barn has been shut down as a national security threat. Can you explain, please?
Well, I mean, technically it's a Chinese bit barn, right? I think it goes down, it boils down to basically there was a company called Mine One, right, which owns this, it's not even a server. I believe it's a blockchain mining. It's a firm. Mm-hmm. And so this facility was built very near to a U.S. military base, Air Force base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where there's missiles based, right? So obviously the government was kind of like, wait a second, this does not sound okay. And so President Biden signed an executive. Pardon?
Sorry, less than a mile away, apparently. And
practically right over the other side of the fence. Missiles. Yeah, very, 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 very close. And the government was pretty much, once they realized this was going on, they weren't quite sure. So that this was going to be okay. So Biden signed an executive order basically forcing its sale and getting that Chinese-controlled facility out of the backyard of a U.S. missile facility.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're given 120 days, which means they're going to have to do a forced sale, which is good news for anyone buying, but it seems a bit of a stretch to say that, just having a server farm, admittedly very close, but having a server farm that close to a nuclear base is a national security threat.
Probably. I mean, let's be realistic, right? I mean, the worst it could be, right, is maybe a headquarters for other Chinese cyber operations if the company was being that blatant, right? But I doubt a Bitcoin mining operation is probably actually snooping on a missile silo. It's probably just a matter of this is where the electricity is cheap. So stick it here in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming.
Yes, I guess so. I mean, the amount of panic over China at the moment, I'm old enough to remember when in the 90s and China opened itself up to the free market, everyone was like, yes, this is a great opportunity for us to develop them. And then now, they're kind of out developing us. But on the security side, it's looking very grim. I know the Brits have been kicking up a stink about this, Jessica. What's your take?
I mean, I think it's echoing what we heard from Cyber UK this week. I think it's a similar thing at RSA that I attended last week, where we're hearing from top cyber and intelligence officials in the US and the UK that China is public enemy number one when it comes to cyber threats, espionage, infiltrating our networks and the like. As far as what I think about it, I think it's more of the same. I don't think it's anything new. I think we've known for quite a while that China is on all of our networks. And both in the UK and the US, officials have been hammering that point home for the last several months. And we saw that continue this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's... I don't know, in terms of general annoyance, maybe Russia might be the bigger problem because it's hosting so many ransomware operators. But when it comes to espionage, China certainly. If you look at some of their aircraft, they bear remarkable similarities to American aircraft in that sense. And it does seem like they've progressively pwned most of our infrastructure. I mean, in terms of, for example, if it came to a war with Taiwan, how badly do you think we'd be exposed?
Yeah, well, I mean... Ultimately, I think that China would probably find it had easier going in that than people think, because the American public's willingness to put up with a major sustained campaign is probably going to be pretty difficult, particularly if you have the same forces that you have sort of now clamoring to support Russia in charge. It's much more of a transactional thing, and they may figure, hey, well, we're just going to sort of give up on that. I mean, the flip side of that is that Taiwan is so strategically important with its chip business that maybe there's more incentive to protect them, but it's certainly going to be a big ask to do that, and I think they're planning on deterrence rather than actually figuring out in real battle who's going to prevail.
I mean, especially if any of these threats really did come to fruition, that we're hearing from U.S. officials, I think that, well, A, it probably would spark a physical war, but also B, I think that the American public wouldn't have any tolerance for that either, in terms of if our involvement is going to mean any cyber threats on the U.S., I don't think that's a trade that the American public is willing to make.
Yeah, I think it also raises the question of, right, like we're always hearing about how many fingers, China has in our infrastructure, in our systems. I mean, I have no doubt that, right, we're just as embedded in their systems, right? I mean, so like, I think there's also probably the question. You're right. There's also the question of, like, right. I think we raised this in the last Kettle, actually, right? Is this the new version of mutually assured destruction, right? Do we all have fingers in each other's systems to the point where no one's willing to risk a major conflict, because if they do, they're looking at the total collapse of their entire internet and their digital ecosystem. It really makes me wonder at what point we're going to reach that, if we haven't already.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, do you remember the Office of Personnel Management hack, where they got sort of security clearances and fingerprint details for a lot of people, and it was attributed to China? And the ex-head of the NSA was just like, yeah, I can see why they'd do that. If we got the opportunity to do the same to them, we would. And,
right.
We hear an awful lot about Chinese hacking into us, but very, very little about how deeply embedded we are in the Chinese systems. So,
well, I think probably, there's also something to be said for the fact that I think China has really been good about putting a massive, firewall up at the edge of their country, right? I mean, the people of that country can't largely get out, right? They've pretty much shut down a whole bunch of Western applications, websites, and products, right? And again, right, it's the same sort of thing, right? We talk a lot about how China, how TikTok is this malevolent entity that's hell bent on destroying America, right? But we never talk about how the Chinese years ago were like, we know Facebook and Google, etc., are hell bent on getting into China and influencing its culture, so we're going to stop them from doing so. Again, right? It's just a matter of, like, we keep talking about how this one side is doing all these horrible things, when it's like, I'm pretty sure we probably are too, and it probably tips the scale in a way we're not quite sure of.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting test that's going to go on, I think, with this election. That people, sort of defenders of free speech, very frequently say the solution to censorship is more free speech, but we may find out that limitless free speech via social media and influence peddling and election meddling may put an end to that system. So it may be that if you add enough free speech, what you get is dictatorship in the end. So hopefully not, but that's a test that we're going to have to run.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's going to be an
running up
election.
against some Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance here, right? If we let everything be free speech, right? At what point do we just cede ground to the people who don't want to allow free speech?
Yeah. No, Popper was dead on that, and well worth reading up on. But also, we got the news towards the end of the week that Microsoft is offering some of its key engineers the chance to get out of China. Now, Microsoft has an 8,000-person R&D center and has offered 10% of staff the opportunity to leave the country. And I think they're worried about the government retaliating over various the tariffs, as we've said, and various other things. I mean, a quick question to you all: would you work in China given the opportunity?
No.
I'm good. Love to visit. Going to leave my electronics at home.
Yeah, I mean, countries not to be a journalist in. I mean,
China, Russia, unless you like being close to Windows or indeed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, gonna have to pass on that.
The first time I went to China, I had a disturbing experience where I left my laptop in the hotel room and switched off and came back and it was switched on and the lid was open. And it was like, thank goodness I bought a burner laptop. But
For sure.
Not a great place to be a journalism or for free speech. But on the other hand, they do make some very nice iPhones very cheaply. So,
and a lot of stuff. I was actually, this entire discussion we're having right now really kind of brings me back to an interview I did earlier this week, which we haven't published yet. We may as of the time this Kettle gets published. But I did an interview earlier this week with an energy analyst talking about how sodium-ion batteries, right, is another technology ground that we're sort of ceding to China.
Are these the very fast recharging ones?
Sodium-ion batteries are basically they're more stable. They're less stable, but they are a good alternative in that they're probably good for central storage. They're cleaner, they're safer. They don't involve lithium. All those good technologies. But it's again, right, we're ceding this ground to China, right? It's this thing that we've done incredibly well, and then we've just kind of stopped, right? Because no one wants to take this risk. There's all these embedded structures in companies, and lithium ion is a pretty powerful industry, right? So no one wants to take the chance on these sodium batteries that don't work as well, but China is willing to take all these chances and do all these things. And it kind of makes me wonder sometimes if we're not in this sort of, post-entrepreneurial spirit era, a la Apple, right? Where it did all these amazing things, made all these wonderful technologies, and now it's just kind of stagnating, right? It's resting on its laurels, and it's not doing as much as it used to. And that means that, smaller companies, upstarts like China, can do all this stuff and make all these technological leaps while the United States just gets left behind, which kind of makes me wonder if we're not mutually, able to go toe to toe with China on all this cyber warfare stuff. How far behind are we?
I fear an awful lot. I mean, it's not just Apple, Google, Intel, a bunch of tech companies have basically been resting on their laurels for the last 10 years. And China is saying, right, let's go out and get there. They're throwing huge amounts of money at processor design. They're getting stuff done. I mean, Jess, Tom, you're both Californians like myself. The inability to get a high-speed rail link between San Francisco and Los Angeles is something the Chinese must be laughing their socks off at.
Yeah.
They can get this done in a year. It's been 14
right. I mean,
years.
yeah, we've been talking about that for 20 years now?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. I mean, say what you like about China, I could say plenty, but they get stuff done. Usually at the point of a barrel, down the barrel of a gun, but, they get it done.
Yeah, but I mean, there's something to be said for democracy too. So,
of course, yeah,
very much so. Yeah,
if it slows things down a bit, I'm fine with it, right? But it just unfortunately makes me wonder if we're being hamstrung when it comes to our eventual confrontation with China.
Yeah.
Is it really eventual though, or do you think?
I hope
I don't
not.
know. I get the feeling this could be a long Cold War, hopefully, rather than a short hot one.
Yeah, I mean, the Russians seem to have demonstrated that the proper model is just to nibble away at the edges. Of course, that's harder to do when you're trying to take an island. But I suspect there's going to be a lot of careful encroachment because no one really wants to do anything that sets off a major conflict.
Yes, I mean, on the online front, China seems to be effectively, the master of the game at the moment. I mean, Jess, you've reported on so many Chinese parties going into, I hate the term threat actors, and hackers doesn't really do it because they're black hats. So, but I mean, the Chinese are really good at this stuff, aren't they?
Right, they are. And I mean, we've seen the FBI come out and say that. I think it's something like they have 50 for every one of ours. So they're putting a lot of money, a lot of manpower into this. It's not a surprise to anybody. And it's also a little bit hard to determine exactly how infiltrated they are. But it does seem that on the cyber front, they're investing quite a bit more than the US and other Western nations.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting case to see how this develops, and I suspect it's going to get ugly before it gets better, but we shall have to see. Well, thank you very much. Always good to chat on the Kettle, and we'll be back next week. In the meantime, if you want to catch this on audio only for some reason, then you can get it from your usual podcast channels. But other than that, thank you for joining us.